Hi, everyone. I'm Felicity Broennan with algaeplanet.com, and we're here today with another installment of Women of Algae. Today, my guest is Alexia Akbay, who is the founder and CEO of Symbrosia, a marine biotech company based in Kona, Hawaii, that's developing a feed additive made from red seaweed in order to reduce livestock methane. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree from New York University in chemistry and earned her Master's of Public Health from Yale. Alexia, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Felicity. I'm excited for this discussion.
So I'm curious about your background, specifically the combination of green chemistry and public health. And I'm wondering what interests of yours led to that combination of study?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my journey through science and education is probably similar to many, where you're interested in some form of science, chemistry, biology, but the system really only caters to pre-med majors, and so you're kind of forced into that track of study. And so I went through pre-med as an undergrad and kind of continued even further on the public health field in my master's, but really transitioned to environmental health because I knew I was more interested in the natural environment and sustainability, and was trying to find the intersection between human health and how the environment did affect some of those major kind of health concerns, because most of the, I guess, root causes in the healthcare system are environmentally based, whether that's the built environment or our natural environment. So that's how I kind of got in to algae as well, just transition from pre-med closer and closer to environmental health and solutions.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that segues nicely into this next question. I noticed that earlier in your career, you were researching what you call petroleum-based consumer products. And I wondered if you could tell us about that. And then it sounds like, what inspired that transition into algae. You just said that, but if you make the connection a little bit more for us.
Yeah, I guess, similarly, I was in my master's doing a lot of research on these consumer products and the effects that they had on human health. And that would be, I guess, green chemistry category, and was pretty, I guess, uninspired by academia's ability to translate research into the real world. And I think that I knew pretty quickly after beginning in a more legitimate academic research setting that this isn't where I wanted to be, that I saw a lot of wonderful innovations happening outside of the lab in startups in these kind of really growth-driven environments, and that there was opportunity for real change and not just kind of being published and seeking out another grant and hoping that you can continue that process for the rest of your career. And so I was really motivated to get out of academic research.
So how did you first learn about the relationship between seaweed and methane reduction?
Yeah, honestly, just reading papers. I really enjoy scientific reading way more than any other kind of genre. So I try to stay abreast of the new literature coming out, and came across this one paper that showed the dramatic reduction in methane when using the species that we're working with, Asparagopsis taxiformis. And at the time, no one was kind of working on commercial operations with this seaweed species. That kind of triggered me to apply for a small grant just to kind of start looking at feasibility. And it's really been a learning curve since then. A lot of what we started out doing was self-taught or mentor-based and taught until we were able to really get a foundation and solidify an algae program here. But it was a lot of fun, I guess, kind of getting into the industry just out of interest and fascination with algae, which I'm sure is a shared kind of phenomenon in the algae industry.
Yes, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about Symbrosia. Where did that name come from, and what are the ultimate goals of the company? And
yeah, so Symbrosia is, I guess, a merger of two words, symbiosis and ambrosia. So symbiosis, mutual beneficial relationship, and ambrosia, food of the gods. And that was, we decided on that, I guess, over a couple of cocktails one night in a major brainstorm. But at the time, the goals of the company were actually to use waste nutrients from other operations. And so that was the symbiosis part. That's been kind of deprioritized for us, knowing that working with a new species is complicated enough to start with. And then the ambrosia was, yeah, just trying to create these really sustainable food sources through, these farming practices. So that's where the name came from. Our alternate goals now are really, we have a strain selection and breeding program for the species. So that's one big part of our research here is establishing viable seed stocks of the species that we're working with. We can't just purchase it from a university like a strain lab, and so we have to do that all internally. And then the other goals are really cost-effective production of this crop in a way that makes sense for the feed industry, and doing that in a way that we find is in alignment with our sustainability values. So, and that's across algae in general, using different sources of inputs that are more sustainable, and then making sure that our total life cycle analysis is on par with the mission of reducing emissions and not creating more damage. So those are the major goals. We are in Kona, Hawaii, because of the facilities that are here. There's been a lot of biofuel kind of test beds in the aquaculture park that we're located at currently. So the facilities have been built for algae research and kind of commercial demonstration pilots like we're interested in doing. So we've been really fortunate to be located here and have access to all of these resources to get this program started.
Algae goes in so many different directions these days. Why was it that you chose livestock as the particular focus of your seaweed company?
Yeah, I think when we look at the impact that livestock has on global warming, climate change, the methane emissions from livestock, depending on the source, account for 8 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So I think myself and the team are all extremely excited to be able to translate algae, not only into a really wonderful and efficient crop that grows with little resources, but into this high reduction potential of greenhouse gases. So the translation, of 1 kilogram of algae reduces 9 kilograms of methane emissions is pretty extreme. And there's a lot of impact that could be had. It also seems a little bit more attainable than right now, maybe than some of the other larger scale, really impactful solutions like biofuel. I think the market is ready for a seaweed feed additive, and we're pretty confident that we'll be able to produce at the price that's needed. And so it seems like good timing that this could really be, a leading industry maybe for algae in the coming couple of decades.
And what are some of your biggest entrepreneurial challenges that you're facing?
Yeah. So I got a lot of advice on this one starting out, but it really becomes a priority. Just managing a team and getting talented people on your team, making sure that everyone's happy and supported is a good bit of what I do day to day. So I've actually transitioned more from being a scientist and running my own experiments to supporting all the wonderful scientists on our team that are running experiments. And that can be just ongoing as a challenge, and big learning lessons there. I think another thing that, we're a new algae industry, and some other algae species have had more success in this, but collaborating across our industry or collaboration has been pretty minimal. And I think that we're going to need to increase collaboration across the Asparagopsis sector in order for us to actually make this a successful industry. So we're moving in that direction a little bit, but it's going to be exciting to make, I think, bigger strides in that area and figure out ways to share research and information or collaborate across the sector. And then, always improving our research is a challenge, but a fun one. Getting better at designing experiments and figuring out new ways to test different concepts and make sure that they're commercially viable, and moving from the lab to pilot semi-commercial capacity is also a big challenge. You know, you've figured out everything in the lab, and then when you go outside we're using open ponds, there's a number of other challenges that we may have some information on, but you know, not quite clear on the exact processes or operations of a larger facility.
How is the livestock industry responding to your approach?
Yeah, it's really good timing for us now. A lot of the larger brands in the industry that sell beef or dairy products have corporate climate-based emission reduction targets. So if you think about a company like McDonald's, they are hoping to reduce their total company emissions by 31% by 2030. And a good bit of their emissions comes from methane from livestock, you know, maybe even 50% of their total company emissions. And so they're ready to pay those in their supply chain, you know, whatever additional cost it's going to require to reduce that emissions. Otherwise, they're going to have to buy carbon offsets elsewhere or really not make their targets. So we're seeing top-down implementation of reduction or technologies. We're seeing interest at the farmer level or the farm operator managing level as well. I think farmers are stereotypically like resistant to technology, but I think we got through the first wave of technology implementation on like different agricultural agricultural industries. And so they're a little bit more interested now, which is exciting, that maybe they already have a couple of tools and they're ready to try out like another technology and be able to, sell a premium product that they could get, 15 to 20% more from their direct purchasers, and also participate in this new carbon economy, which is super exciting. That, maybe not only for this solution, but the way that they manage their farm and their land, they could also get carbon credits. And there's a number of opportunities opening up for those in the sector. And I'm surprised at like how much it's being welcomed, but I think it is time for a good bit of like innovation and agriculture, at least to like livestock or traditional livestock ag. So it's been a lot of fun to work with those that produce our food and learn from them.
Yeah, I noticed, speaking of the offsets, I noticed that in addition to your growing and developing this feed supplement, you're also offering methane offsets. And I'm wondering how people are responding to that.
Yeah, that was like a fun project that we did. The proceeds from those offsets go straight to supplementing seaweed on the trial farms that we've been working with. So it's nice that it helps buffer the cost for those initial trials. We find that, so the options are basically that you could like offset your meat and dairy consumption through purchasing one of our programs. It's a pretty minimal cost, like you could do monthly or one time, but we're seeing it, we haven't like pushed it too much, but we do get a good bit of inflow through that program, enough to fund projects. So it's kind of just nice for us to go through the process of quantifying the emission reductions on the farm, making sure that we're meeting like our product standards and quality that we'd like, and then being able to offer that in the market and see how people respond.
Yeah, I noticed on your website that you profile a small farm on Lopez Island.
Yeah.
And you're testing some of your product on some of their cows. Tell us about that. What are you learning?
Yeah, that was a fun one. It's a pretty small trial. We only did 4 head of cattle, and because they're a little bit smaller, I think that one of the learning lessons there was that some of the equipment that we might want on the farms to be able to collect like a number of different pieces of data, they didn't have. So that's really informed like our next trials and needing to work with like medium-sized farms instead of like very tiny farms. So that was a good learning lesson. I think it was a lot of fun for them too, because they got to use the methane monitoring equipment and measure the reductions in their livestock. They also had like a commercial compost on site. So I think they used the methane monitor to look at the methane coming from their compost too. So that was kind of interesting. But it was a little bit difficult to supplement in such a small setting that they were actually hand feeding the seaweed to the cattle. And so that's something to consider going forward, is working with larger farms that might have a little bit more like feed infrastructure, to better take on those projects. But we did see like a pretty significant reduction in methane, over 80% on their livestock over the course of that trial. So that was, I mean, successful in that way, that we know that the product works. I think it's just about implementation then at this point.
Yeah, how do you see scaling up this production so that you can see a major impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of what we're doing now is trying to focus on improving the yield and the productivity per land area, because it is going to be, a scaling problem of enough acreage, I think, to grow this crop. We still grow it photosynthetically, and so that the major resource there is the sun. We're a scaling capacity here in Hawaii initially, but have done a number of site selection studies looking at other locations on the mainland United States, Latin America, etc., that are close to markets of interest as well. So I think it's just going to be about coming up with a facility plan that we think is replicable, and then working with partners to either fund those facilities elsewhere and we help with the technology and growing practices, or continue to scale ourselves, but also recognizing that we need other people to be growing it to get the impact that we want. And so that goes back to the collaboration bit as well. We're not here, we are going to be a profitable business, but the starting of this industry is really from an impact perspective and wanting to reduce these emissions. So that should be the end goal, and we should be trying to maximize that capacity. So it should be interesting to see how everything rolls out, but I think we're optimistic that there's a number of different methods to continue scaling.
You've received several awards in the last few years, like the GRIST 50, and I'm sure as a young entrepreneur, you're inspiring a lot of people. And I'm wondering, who has most influenced and inspired your thinking?
Honestly, I'm kind of one of those people that seeks feedback from anyone I talk to. And so it's tough to say that one person has been influential, because I'll create a mentor out of anyone I have a phone call with. So I guess, to the number of people in the algae industry and partnering industries, it's countless people have really inspired me and given me different bits of information. But also my mom, for sure. So she's an entrepreneur and runs a couple of businesses. And so she's been really helpful in helping me navigate just day to day, which I think is a little bit of like the heavier, more meaningful stuff around running a successful business. So having a strong inspiration like her growing up, I think really allows me to charge into some of this and not be afraid.
What keeps you optimistic about the future?
I just asked this to someone else the other day too, considering the new IPCC report. A lot of people in our office took that pretty harshly. I think it's a little bit scary. And it really puts the pressure on those working in climate solutions to move faster, which is, a burden that maybe we shouldn't be holding, but that we are. And so I think, one of the things that's inspiring is that 1% of the GDP can slow climate change. And so if we're willing to contribute just 1% of our GDP to stopping this, is really accelerating warming, that we could. And I think, algae, just going back to the algae, is inspiring just in the way that it is so adaptable and so resourceful. While I started this work thinking about the impact, really what keeps me coming back is that I'm continuously amazed by the capacity of our seaweed to do new things, and for us to learn about like foundational science through one species. I think that's really interesting day to day, and gets me excited to come and do this work. So yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like our viewers to know about your company or this developing application of aquaculture?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see, I guess, if there are more solutions coming out in seaweed. I know that a lot of like commercialization in the algae sector has focused on microalgae traditionally, but I would really encourage those experts in microalgae to come join us in macroalgae as well. We need your experience and your years of research and understanding about these organisms, I think, to unlock the potential in different macroalgae species as well. So I know I'm a little bit new to the industry, but I encourage anyone to reach out. We're interested in collaborating and meeting and sharing information from the industry.
Great. Thank you for that. Well, it's been such a pleasure to speak with you and learn more about your company, your ambitions, your successes, and I wish you well with Symbrosia and all that you're endeavoring. It's wonderful work. Thank you again, and thank you for being with us as part of this program.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye-bye.